Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. Recorded a podcast with Dave Brown about the trade deadline and Jed's extension, all the important stuff, and Ryne Sandberg. And the very beginning of it, the whole recording got screwed up. I don't know. It wasn't me, I promise. So what you're going to get, if you're watching it, is the backup copy, a low-res version of us, which is probably better for us. It's all there, except there wasn't. It cut off my welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. So it's going to start up from there. Everything else should be this fine. There was a missing hunk in the in the middle, only of my stuff. So then Dave's was all like, Dave's audio was fine, and then you didn't hear me for 4 glorious minutes. But then when I finally did come back in, it wasn't in the right spot. So it didn't make any sense, less sense than normal. So the backup copy was fine, and that's what I'm using. So enjoy. We're on the eve of the trade deadline. Is that how that works? New trade deadline eve with National Baseball writer David Brown.
Yes, 2 eves.
2 eves. Yeah, everybody. I heard a bunch of 3 days before the deadline stuff yesterday. It's like, I'm pretty sure Thursday is 4 days from Monday. I guess 3 if you count Monday. Do we have a calendar expert?
This is like one of those conversations about when have we batted around?
Yes. When do you bat around? When does the new decade start? Or a millennium? How many days away from Monday is Thursday? All the fascinating stuff. We're going to get into that for the next 45 minutes here on the Pointless Exercise Podcast. So there's an interesting article in The Athletic. Because clearly that's what I do. I just read The Athletic right before we go on, and I just tell you about what's in The Athletic. But Andy McCullough wrote an article about what he called the personalities of MLB's trade deadline: hunters, fishermen, and the Cleveland Guardians. Cleveland grind machine is what he called them. Basically, it's an article about how the different personalities of the GMs, I'm just going to use GM as the overarching term for president of baseball operations and whatever.
Yes.
Is that your walk-up music?
Sorry, I have a band.
Guys, rehearsals. We're not rehearsing right now. I'm just going to use GM as the catch-all for whoever the person is at the end of the day on each team that says yes or no to the trade. But he's just basically talking about how some teams are easy to deal with, some teams are difficult to deal with, and sometimes they're difficult to deal with for no apparent reason. Like the Rockies, who actually made a trade. They actually did. They traded a veteran player. And everybody's like, oh, look at that. You guys can do it. Congratulations. And they talk about like AJ Preller of the Padres is like Mr. Trade. He's always thinking of trades, to the point where you think you're just talking to AJ about a deal, and he's actually at the same time talking to 5 other teams, and he does a trade. And you're like, oh, I guess you don't need our guy now, but that's fine. They talked about Dave Dombrowski is the guy who, when you get the new job, he's the first other GM to contact you and congratulate you, because he's like, hey, there's fresh chum in the water. Who do you got that I could use? Actually, no, they say he is being nice, and he knows that the quicker he builds a rapport with you, the more likely it is he can make a trade with you later. It's a lot of it's like common sense stuff. They talk in here about how like some teams just don't want to talk about their own players ever, and other GMs want to talk about them all the time. They kind of use it almost as like they want your opinion on their players, A, to see if you're interested, but B, they just kind of want to know what you think about them, which seems like kind of a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And then my favorite, I mentioned this to you right before we went on, even though this is about current GMs, there is a quote in here about Jim Hendry, who is one of my all-time favorite GMs. It says, Former Cubs general manager Jim Hendry told, as he's telling Alex Anthopoulos this, I'm so candid and transparent that the other side doesn't believe me. They meant by that is he will actually tell you, like, well, we've got this guy, this kid. I don't think he can do this, but he might be able to help you. And teams would like try to like parse out, like, what did he mean? What do you think he meant by that? I think he meant that because he's Jim Hendry. He doesn't have time for nuance.
That would be funny though if that were just part of his long game.
Well, it's just act like, hey, I'll tell you anything, and he's completely lying.
And then talking about telling everyone about everything and not being an active GM, but maybe someday he'll be like an interim again or something, and he'll be able to make trades, and people will be thinking about all of that meta stuff. Oh, was he serious about what he said before? And is he just too truthful? So that's part of Hendry's long game, man.
I appreciate it. He's the guy who traded bags of nothing for Aramis Ramirez and Derek Lee within about 6 months. Pretty good.
Yeah.
We didn't have to worry about Jim being active at the trade deadline. That's the great Theo Epstein story about the Nomar trade. Was that getting close to the deadline, the Red Sox were like, okay, this isn't going to happen. We don't have a fit. And then Hendry's like, don't you give up. I've got, I'll work something out. And he's like, we just sat back, and he called like 8 other GMs. And all of a sudden, like 10 minutes before the deadline, he had roped in, the Expos and the Twins. And it's like, that's his trade. We just looked at it and went, okay, we'll do that.
All right. Well, Orlando Cabrera has to play for 2 different teams now, but I think we can get a waiver.
And that's the crazy thing about it. Like, the Cubs would have been far better off if he had just done the simple trade for Orlando Cabrera.
Yeah.
But that's fine. They did not win in 2004 because of Nomar. They imploded on their own. I probably would have, even with Orlando there, trying to pull things together. But all this stuff's going on right now. Teams are yakking back and forth and trying to make stuff happen. And it's been a relatively sedate deadline. Like, who's the biggest player in terms of pant size and impact to be traded so far as Josh Naylor?
Yeah, I would say. And that was even, when was that? Last week?
Yeah, like Friday?
Yeah.
Saturday? But it's almost like you almost fall into this spot before the deadline where it's too late to jump it. So it's almost like everybody's now waiting until almost the last minute to see if something better will come along before they finally say yes.
Well, we've talked about this before. It might not be the bad fit for the trade deadline might be the time of it.
Yeah.
That with the added teams, maybe it would make sense to extend this a couple weeks into August.
Yep. It was crazy to me that they in the last CBA, they added a playoff team. They got rid of the August waiver trades, and they didn't move the deadline at all. Like, either of those things should have moved the deadline back 2 weeks to August 15th.
Yeah.
And both happened, and they didn't do it. And I don't get it. I don't know who didn't want, like, who didn't like the August trade thing. I assumed it was players didn't like it. It was just extra uncertainty. Deals? Yeah, the waiver trades. It was extra uncertainty. Sometimes it was embarrassing. Like, if some hotshot player got through waivers and everybody knew it, kind of like, hey, nobody wants you in your contract. And I kind of wonder if the players were like, we don't want to do that anymore.
I think that's a big reason why, actually. Yeah.
But yeah, there's too many teams right now. And I think most of it is, and most teams have a pretty good handle on whether they're in it or not. I do think there's teams that don't want to admit to their fans that they're not in it. Like, you should still buy tickets for games in August because we're still trying.
Right.
Instead of, we're screwed.
Well, the Tigers were I don't know, were they 10 under or something like that, or 10 out? They were almost 2 weeks into August before they started to play better.
Yeah.
So
I looked that up. I'll look it up again quick. I looked that up. I was thinking about that last week. I looked up to see where they were at the deadline. Because, yeah, they sold. They didn't kind of sell. They sold. And
Jack Flaherty
ended up not just making the playoffs, but advancing around. So on July 31st last year, the Tigers were 52-57. They were in fourth place. And they weren't just in fourth place in their division. They were 8 games behind the Royals, who were in third place. So they were way back there. And let's see, in the wild card standings, the Tigers were 3-7. Fun. It's like they were third. Well, no, that's where they ended up at the end of the season. They were 8 games out of the wild card. There were the Red Sox, the Mariners, and the Rays were in between them and the third wild card.
Mm-hmm.
So they were out of it. It was over. And then, like you said, they went crazy and didn't even do it right away. It's not like August 1st they got hot.
Right.
The other thing that seems to paralyze teams, it's the Diamondbacks' fault. When they went to the World Series 2 years ago with 83 wins.
Mm-hmm.
And like, see, all you got to do is get in that third wildcard spot. Anything can happen. The Cubs, Tom Ricketts loves to talk about that because he loved the idea that, we just have to build an 83-win team. Well, you did the last 2 years. It didn't make the playoffs either time. In fact, one time it lost by a game to the Diamondbacks, and they went to the World Series. But I've always thought that was kind of like the Diamondbacks that year were good. And they were good into like the middle of June, like in first place, like a surprise first place team. And then they had some injuries and they completely hit the skids and they fell out of it. And in a normal non-3 wildcard season, the Diamondbacks would have looked back and said, we had a good team that year. And it just kind of fell apart on us.
Right.
Well, with the third wildcard, they had enough time to get it back together. And they kind of bought at the deadline. They got Paul Sewald for their bullpen, and they picked somebody else up. So I always felt like that wasn't an instance of like a mediocre team that got hot in the playoffs. I felt like that was a good team that the third wild card gave them a second chance, and then they went on. So they actually had built a good team, and because they had an extra playoff spot, they were able to correct in time to, like they were a good team in the playoffs. They weren't a typical 83-win team fumbling their way through the playoffs. So I want to ask you about how a team that is selling should approach the last few days before the deadline. A good example of that is the same Diamondbacks, who are just too beat up this year, and Zach Gallen's bad. They were kind of tangentially still in it and just made the decision, we have a really good core here. We've got some guys who are going to leave as free agents. Let's get some players for them, and let's just go at it next year. And they finally decided they were going to sell. They traded Josh Naylor. And they have the best hitter on the market in Eugenio Suarez, or as Dave Kaplan insists, Eugenio Suarez. I'm going to go with Pat Hughes in the Eugenio because he's in the Hall of Fame. It's probably wrong, but it's more fun to say. And he got hit on the hand last night in a game against the Tigers, a team who was allegedly trying to trade for him. Apparently, Will Vest is like, I don't like you, and just hit him right in the hand. or like, I like Alex or Zach McKinstry and I are buddies, and you're going to take his spot. I'll just nail you in the hand. Or maybe he just accidentally hit him in the hand. I don't know. So Suarez, X-rays were negative, but it feels like X-rays are always negative. Like, does the X-ray machine is it hooked to anything in the one in the ballpark? Or it's an iPhone? They have an app for that. Oh, it's fine.
Maybe they get maybe MLB knew that the Diamondbacks were using the weaker balls, so they weren't as hard as the home run balls, the juice balls. So they have some intelligence on that as well, and that's why it's not broken.
That could be.
It seems like Byron Buxton gets hit in the hand every 2 weeks, and people hold their breath, and he's okay.
Yep. Well, Eugenio is getting a bone scan today, and that will determine whether or not how bad it is.
Sounds painful.
And so I wonder. You just wonder at some point if you're selling, and you've got a player who you are trying to trade, why are you still playing him in the last few days before the deadline? The only thing that can happen is bad. Are there teams out there who are like, we really need to see 3 more Eugenio at bats before we can decide if he's worthy of trading for or not?
Well, I think you are hitting on a couple different topics, and there's some paradoxes and contradictions, and one reason for one thing and another reason for another. At some point, everybody agrees, about the whole, well, don't play the guy because he might get hurt, so take him out of the lineup. Usually then, like that day, the guy's traded. Yeah. So it's only when the deals get to that point. But you also have that factor of now with everybody in it still, they're going to wait until the last possible second. And, you're still, I don't know, teams still have you don't want to, if you're the Diamondbacks, you're planning on trading Suarez, but you don't want to have him sit on the bench for 4 days. It's just not a good look or a good feel that he's doing that just to protect him in case. I mean, now maybe you could do it. You say, well, he's got a sore hand after the fact. But I think you're talking about, should they pretend like the trade could happen any minute, even if there's 5 more days to go.
Right.
And just to protect the asset, get him out of the lineup. But I just think there's too many downsides to that don't have to do with the trade so much as it's depressing. It's the state of mind of the team. You still want to try and win the games. You mentioned, I think you mentioned, well, maybe the trade deadline should be later. So, because we still want to sell tickets to these games earlier in the season. And, so you still want people to come to the games. There's a few different competing interests here. So I think that's why you don't necessarily just give the guy a week off when the trade deadline's coming, just because it's a bad look.
Now I think, now I think you almost have to, if the bone scan is negative, you kind of have to play him tonight.
Now you have to play him
to prove to the other teams that his hand's not broken.
Right. Yes.
I mean, it's crazy. He got hit right before he got hit in the hand right before the All-Star break by one of the White Sox, and then he got hit in the hand in the All-Star game by another White Sox. He's been hit 3 times in the last 10 days with pitches on his left hand, his bottom hand. It's like maybe they're trying to they're trying to tell you something, Eugenio. I would play him tonight, but I would wrap him in pillows. Pillows everywhere. He barely moves, but he's healthy.
Motion on the swing.
Yeah, he's really. Do you think he's changed his swing? Well, yeah, he's completely encased in memory foam right now. He can't move. He's changed his swing. Yes.
Why does he look like an entire Jeff Bagwell?
I mean, every time a guy gets hit in the hand, I think of Bagwell would get hit in the hand all the time. He missed big hunks of 2 seasons because of it. And do you remember then what the solution was? Do you remember his batting glove with the pad taped to the top of it?
It looked like it had infinity stones in it or something.
It's like, who the hell thinks that's going to work? Here you go. This will save you. Oh, I like this. Yeah. Like we put 3 inches of foam rubber on top of your glove. That'll protect you from a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. And then, but similarly, Mitch Keller, who is maybe nobody knows what the Pirates are going to do, but he may be on he pitched last night in San Francisco, and they couldn't get him out fast enough. He was getting hit by the mostly punchless Giants. 2 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs. Mitch, go sit down. You're ruining your trade value. Right. But you kind of wonder, okay, it's the same idea. You've scouted this guy for the whole season. How much importance are you going to put on one start? I could see, like, what was it, 2 starts ago, Edward Cabrera left with a elbow soreness.
Right.
And then he has pitched very well the last 2 times, pitched into the 7th the first time and 6th the last time. So you almost need those starts just to reassure the shoppers that he's not damaged goods.
Right.
But it's a similar thing. Like, all you can do now when you send a guy out who you're going to trade right before the deadline, pretty much the only thing that can happen is bad. You can get hurt. That's pretty much the only.
Although maybe with all the different personalities that are in the front offices, perhaps that there's a whole, last second impulse buy, final impression kind of thing, and that's what moves them to make a trade. So, and you might be, as the other guy, maybe you're worried about that. Well, yeah, they should know what this guy offers from scouting, but really what they need is like some sort of emotional push to get over the finish line.
Do you think it's like maybe Jed and Carter are sitting in their little conference room watching games and like, okay, should we make this trade? I don't know. Let's look for a sign. If the next pitch he throws is a strike, we'll trade for him. If it's a ball, we won't. Okay, boss.
They ignored all the hit by pitches on the hand. Those weren't signs.
But I mean, if I'm a seller right now, I do want to drag this out as long as possible. I want some panicked last minute. The player that this guy said he would not, this prospect he would not trade. Right. Now faced with, holy shit, it's almost 5:00 on Thursday and I haven't made a trade. Fine, you can have him. So you weigh that. I hope this guy doesn't get hurt. What the other thing is, it's like, well, if we can wait one more day, we can get that guy that they won't give us right now because, and I'll use the Cubs as an example because I watch every one of their games. I mean, this is a team that is in dire need of starting pitching to the point where a really good season could go right down the drain if you don't fix it. And you can't pay retail price. Everybody knows you're over a barrel. You're just going to have to suck it up and make a trade. And it's funny, the parallels, it's even the same team. It's the Brewers. The parallel for this season for me with the Cubs is 2018, where they went into the final weekend of the season with the possibility that either they could have the best record in baseball and home field throughout the entire playoffs, or they could end up having to play in the wild card game and risk one day and going home. Right. And what ended up was they ended up with both. On Sunday, when the games ended, they were tied with the Brewers for the best record in the Central, but all of baseball. They had to play a tiebreaker game. They lost it. They had to play a wild card game against the fucking Rockies. And they lost it, and they went home. They were the second, at worst, they were the second or third best team in baseball, and their season was over. Mm-hmm. And you look at this team, which is good. It has some flaws, but it's good. And they could very easily end up at the last weekend of the season with the best record in the National League and end up tied with the Brewers. And now there's no game. So if you lose the season series of the Brewers, you're playing in the wild card series, and a team much worse than you could win 2 games and you go home. So there is a lot. I mean, the idea that, well, we could probably make the playoffs with this team. It's like if you don't fix this pitching, you're not going to get out of that first round. Right. So that's fun. They had a very interesting first inning last night against the Miz. They got to come up with a better nickname for that guy than the Miz. I'm old enough to remember that that's the pool player, not a wrestler.
Yeah.
He used to do Miller Lite commercials. Yeah. They scored 3 runs on him in the first inning on a bases loaded strike 3 wild pitch. You'll never guess who was batting. Pete Armstrong. And a 3-foot single by Ian Happ that the Miz raced off the mound, picked up, and threw into the right field corner. Right. Which should have been an error. It's like, no, that should not have been a hit. It should have been an error.
That wasn't an error.
It was originally an error and then changed to a hit.
Nice.
It ended up being a hit and an error.
because of the extra base.
Yes, the scorekeeper took the. Oh, fine. It's both. I've been there. It's
Yes,
you make you make both sides, but you make both teams mad instead of one.
Right.
You go, it's hit and an error. It's everything. Pick the one you want. And then Matt Boyd came out and he couldn't throw a strike for the first time. And he pitched so well. And he was just all over the place in the first inning and never really got it together. And the Cubs lost. Now they're in second place. So that's fine. Not like I'm paying any attention. The Padres are trying to do something very interesting because they're the Padres. They always try to do something interesting. Apparently, they are trying to trade Dylan Cease. Yeah. But they're not selling. The plan that I can't imagine AJ has actually told people this, but the plan people have tried to interpret from his actions is he would take what he gets for Cease, keep some of it, package some of it, and trade for a guy like they're very interested in Sandy Alcantara. Because whether or not you think Sandy can get it together this year, which he doesn't show any signs he's going to, he signed for 2 more years after this, and he has a history of being really good. The idea would be we'll turn the last 2 months of Dylan Cease into 3 years of Sandy, and we'll still try to compete. Cease's numbers all look bad. He's like 4-10 with an ERA over 4, almost 4.5, I think. But his underlying numbers are all fine. He's still Dylan Cease. His strikeout rate's the same. His walk rate's the same. His hit rate is the same. So there's a lot of like bad luck baked into that. And so they're just going to try to do both things at once. Does that ever work? Or does anybody ever try this?
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I mean, I can't think of an example, but maybe I can think of like that sounds like something Preller has done before, honestly.
Yeah.
It's certainly in his I don't know if it's like exactly like that, but he's made deals like that before.
The Cubs have been sniffing around the Washington Nationals' Mackenzie Gore, and I can see why. He's really good. But the Nats have an interim GM.
Yeah.
Is there any chance he's going to make that trade in season?
He would have a better idea than us about, well, what are my chances of staying here?
Yeah.
In this job. Yeah, I don't. And if I'm his boss, I don't know if that's the owner or if there's a president. I'm not up on who's run the Nationals at the second.
I would think you have to run it by Trump.
I think you might want to keep your options open on Gore, keeping him around.
Yeah. It seems like if, number one, you only have 3 good players in your whole team. You probably should keep them. Number 2, if this is a trade you really decide you want to make, this to me feels like this is a winter meetings trade. This isn't a trade deadline trade.
Right.
So but apparently it's still being kicked around. And I'm like, this was just like the Cubs to just distract themselves, spend a lot of time on this at the deadline when it's never going to happen. When you need, it would be great. I mean, he's really good. It even got somebody's like, oh, they'd have too many lefties then. Because they'd have Shota, and they'd have Boyd, and they'd have Gore, and then next year they'd have Steele. It's like, well, who cares, right? Like, the idea is just to get good pitchers. Isn't that more important than what handed they are?
The Nationals are kind of, and I would assume Owen Casey would be part of like a Gore deal. I don't know if do they need a young outfielder? I think they're pretty good in the outfield. Maybe
the name supposedly that the Nats really want is they want Matt Shaw. So then the Cubs would be trading their third baseman. So you'd almost have to then get
Eugenio.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's funny to me that, and I know it's one guy, Keith Law. I don't know if you know this about Keith. He has very strong opinions about things, about board games, and about baseball prospects. Those are the 2 things that he has very strong. In his mind, Owen Casey is nothing special. Like he ranked his 60 best prospects, and Owen's not on the list. There are other Cubs that are on the list. Kevin Alcantara is on it. Moises Ballesteros is on it. Casey is not. And I even messaged him right before he was going to do an athletic chat. And I said, go have fun with the Owen Casey stands. And he's like, oh, I've already heard from them. And he gets asked a question in the chat. He's like, where is Casey on your list? He's like, well, he's not on my list, and he shouldn't be because he's not good enough. Okay. And I don't know what to think about the Cubs. Have, they leak to the people they want to get this stuff out about how, oh no, we don't want to trade Casey. If we trade Casey, we'll only trade him for somebody who's controllable. We're not going to trade him for a rental. And there's a whole thought that, if or when Kyle Tucker leaves, that's who takes his spot. And so you can't afford to trade him. But there's also the thought that, well, he's not that good. And so he shouldn't be replacing Kyle Tucker in the first place.
Right.
If I'm the Cubs, you've been building to this, right? This was the whole reason to tear down, and it's worked out fine. Chris Bryant's in traction somewhere, and Anthony Rizzo is, he's got a baby, and he's got his sausage dog and his wife, and they're hanging out on the beach in Florida. And only Javi and Wilson are still kicking around. They couldn't even bother to trade Wilson. Speaking of a guy who likes to get hit in the hand, it's Wilson, and then he likes to try to start fights with the Padres whenever possible. But the whole idea doing your teardown was you were going to build as quickly as you could. You were going to build up to be a contender again. And you did. It doesn't feel like there ought to be any untradeable prospects in your system.
Right.
Like this worked. It's supposed to go. And you have no guarantee that this team is going to be this good next year, even if you keep all these guys.
Right.
So it's like at some point you got to pick a time to go for it. And if you're not going to go for it this year, I mean, to me, the Tucker trade should have signaled we're going for it this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, you made a trade for a guy you might only have for 1 year. You traded your best prospect, who's turned out to be, so far, really good. Because that's the guy who should have been, that's the guy who should be playing right field next year for you, is Cam Smith. But he can't because he's an Astro. That should take away the fear of, oh no, what about our future? It's like, well, no, you play to win championships, supposedly. Now's the time to do it.
Right.
It's very easy for me to say, because it's not like I won't, because my ethics. Next year, if they've traded all these guys and then they have a gaping hole, I won't be like, wait, see, I told you I shouldn't have traded Owen Casey. I mean, I reserve the right to do it, especially in that voice.
Please do.
Rumor I read today was that the Brewers were in on Naylor. They want a left-handed first baseman to go with the best player in the National League, Andrew Vaughn, who's currently playing for the right-handed part of that, playing first base. The whole Vaughn thing, I'm torn between. He's played 14 games for the Brewers. Anybody can have a 14-game stretch. The thing that worries me about it is I kind of think that maybe the White Sox are just kind of bad at this stuff. And maybe he really, he's not this good, but maybe he was a better player than the Sox could wring out of him.
There have been, that should probably be anybody's first reaction. The reflex action. But if you look at some other guys who have left, not all, but a few, like Eric Fetty, he's kind of fallen apart.
Yeah.
And is now on the Braves after basically getting released almost from the Cardinals. So, Gavin Sheets has stopped hitting and is hurt. So, that I've had the same thought that, wow, he just needed to get away from the White Sox.
Go ahead.
No, there's something to it. But yeah, it's funny too. 14 games he's played. I've seen arguments, Twitter arguments about how, he's been so awesome. It's been amazing. And then he'll have 4 bad games, which he did, 4 or 5. And somebody will go, yeah, well, you haven't been yapping about him and for the past half week. Like, well, no kidding, buddy. It's just 4 games. And then he did another home run. Yeah, the arguments about the short sample arguments have gone already, even though it's only been 14 games. They've already gone both ways.
Yeah.
That, oh, how could the White Sox have blown this? And this is an amazing story, to, yeah, he sucks already. So there's just too much of an instant reaction going on. I don't know. I haven't looked at the underlying data, but I can't imagine that he's really any damn good.
No,
So
I don't think so either. I think the answer probably falls somewhere in between, which with both Sheets and him, which is they were relied on with the White Sox to be everyday players, like an important everyday players for them. They were part of their, flawed plan. And now they're on teams where they're not everyday players, where their managers are picking the matchups for them and trying to pick pitchers they think they can handle because they don't need to play. They have other guys to play on those spots too. And it could be as simple as that, which is, Vaughn doesn't have, red-faced Pat Murphy doesn't have to run him up there against every kind of pitcher. He can be like, oh shit, there's no way Vaughn can hit this guy. And he pinch hits for him or he doesn't start him that day. And he's over his skis even with that, I would guess. I mean, maybe instead of a 217 hitter or whatever it is with the White Sox, he's a 240 hitter. He's better, but he's certainly not 380 or whatever the hell he's hitting right now.
No. If you look early in his career, he had numbers, he was probably 10% better than league average, which is not great for, your first baseman. Or actually, I mean, where the White Sox played him all over the field. The White Sox certainly didn't do him any favors.
No, they didn't.
With their, I'll go play right field. No, I'll go play second base. I mean, it's just completely mishandled him. Well, so I think there is something to what you're saying about, with the proper managing and picking your spots, he can be a helpful player. But that said, I also feel like there's probably a bunch of guys who, if they just got an opportunity, would be able to do that too, that you could pick up off the waiver wire or something. So I don't think this is like Brent Rooker, who had a reputation and then, was a prospect and then kind of stunk and went to 4 different teams. And now, I don't think it's that. I don't think we're going to see Andrew Vaughn at the All-Star game, but I've been proven wrong many times today.
Andrew Vaughn won't be in the swing off next year. It's tied if the game's tied going into the 10th. That whole thing was very entertaining. I liked it. The people were immediately demanding that become the new extra innings thing for every game. It's like, no, you wouldn't want that.
No, I'm not even sure if I want this again in the All-Star game, much less in games that matter.
But the funny thing was, and you saw it with Jonathan Aranda being the guy up there taking the last 3 cuts.
Yeah,
was the managers had to pick from the guys who were still there,
right?
Because so many of the stars are gone by then.
Right. You got to get.
So where's Judge? Oh, he's been on a plane for an hour. That's where Aaron Judge is. He's not around to do this. Whoops.
Well, I mean, true. What you say is true, but also he could have picked Bobby Witt.
Well, yeah, it didn't. I didn't get. Does Jonathan Aranda, has he been crushing the Yankees? Is that why? That guy, we can't get that guy out. Sure, a batting practice pitcher can't get him out. It's like, whatever. Yeah, the Vaughn thing. He was the guy the Cubs wanted in the Craig Kimbrell trade, and finally ended up going for the great Nick Madrigal instead. Either one of them would have worked, but that's fine. So the Cubs announced yesterday, I thought that the worst kept secret in Chicago sports, Jed Hoyer has a new contract extension. They won't say how long or how much. It's so weird that they'll tell you every detail about a player contract, but they can't even tell you how many years one of their executives has. I had assumed, and then someone close, a reporter relatively close to the team had said, yeah, everyone assumed that by spring training, Jed had a new deal. They just hadn't announced it yet. Yeah. It just seemed odd timing to announce it right in the middle of the trade deadline. almost like, no, Jed's got a deal, so now he can really go for it.
Right.
Like, what? Isn't it the opposite? Wouldn't he have been really going for it if he's trying to still save his job? Might not make a trade at all now. He's like, all right, I got 5 more years. What the hell do I care? I'm finally under contract longer than my manager. Now I can tell him what to do.
Let's let this roster percolate.
But at least we get more Jed. Jed's fine. Like, I would love them to upgrade, but my fear of what they would end up with if they let him go is greater than my worry about his ability to do the job.
Yeah.
I think if they let Jed go, they would get somebody worse.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well stick with the little guy that you already have.
Right.
I have a theory about, so the most recent suspended player because of ties to gambling is a big deal for a couple of reasons. Big deal because the Guardians lose their closer, but also a big deal because they were shopping him.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And so Emmanuel Classe is now on paid leave. And the thing I wanted to ask you, because I have a theory about it, is we're hearing more, these are happening now. And the immediate thing is, well, see, gambling is legal now, so more of these are going to happen. Do you think that's true? Or do you think because gambling is legal, this stuff is easier to like suss out? Like there's all these gambling places, they look out for this kind of stuff. Whereas before it was when you couldn't bet with DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever, a pitcher tanking first pitch of at bats, whose radar was that going to be on?
That's a great question.
And now all of a sudden it is. And so it's probably an unanswerable question. Is it, this is happening more because more people are now interested in this kind of stuff? Or is it happening the same amount that it was, but there's more safeguards in place to actually notice?
Yeah, I think it does stand to reason that with more legal businesses involved with gambling, that there would be these other businesses that spring from that need to kind of protect those gambling businesses from this kind of behavior. It does make sense that there's more people and more resources put into watching stuff like that. It's not like when, I remember listening to Mike North on The Score talk about, his, he used to call it Pappy's money. He had like a bookie, and I don't think, maybe the bookies employed people to watch for the trends of pitches that were, kind of untoward the catcher, and but I don't think, there's a couple things. Like what's one thing that's different now is the legality of it and the how prolific it is. It's still just as against the rules as it was before for the players to do this, to bet on their own games. That part hasn't changed, but I think there's lots of other things that have changed about the climate that maybe make it more either noticeable or more likely, or, I can't, 10 years ago, I can't imagine there was I don't know, the players, would be less likely to truck with bookies and that world and the underworld of gambling, just because it just seemed more dangerous, and now it's a little more accessible to them. And also there's just more tendency for the fans to, and their social media, and that kind of stuff puts attention on it. And like if you look at the bad time that people have on Twitter and other places, players, most of it is traced back to gamblers who are pissed off about their bets that didn't go well. So it's sort of permeating everything now. It's easier to do. There's less of a stigma. It's not illegal. You don't have to worry about the police getting involved. But I'm interested to hear a little bit more about what you think is going on.
Well, we don't know exactly what the Clase, like we know his teammate, Luis Ortiz, they were looking at specifically 2 pitches. They were both the first pitch of an inning, and they were flagged for unusual gambling activity. I would think anyone gambling on a Luis Ortiz pitch, that should qualify as unusual gambling activity.
Yeah.
And so in that case, I mean, you could honestly just say it was both, that it's easier to spot this stuff now because they could track it better, more legit ways. But because this is so prolific, there would be more people likely to try to put some kind of pressure on a guy like Clase, which people are like, well, he makes, $20 million a year. What the hell? Well, it didn't necessarily, it doesn't mean they were, trying to extort the other nefarious things. And so it's really hard to tell. The way the leagues are in bed with the sports books, this isn't going away. They're not going to be like, oh, there's just too much of this. We're not going to allow activity. You can't bet on baseball anymore. They're not going to do that. Their revenue streams are shrinking in other places, and I mean, I know the for God's sakes, this is how much money some of these places have. DraftKings used to pay me for ads during this podcast, which reminds me that you can get a no-risk $100 bet at DraftKings if you use promo code Clase Suspension. That's Clase Suspension.
I was believing your ad there for a second until you gave the key.
We used to do those. We used to read those right in the middle of the pods. And they finally were like, no, not this guy. No, we're not going to. So I don't know. I think it could be either. It could be both. It could be neither, which is a fun argument to have, which is, I don't know. But the immediate reaction is, see, this is what happens. You've made it legal. There's all these people now that can bet much far. You don't have to know a guy to place a bet. You don't have to go to Vegas to place a bet. You can all you need is a phone. And we know it's a problem. There are, the whole idea, I think, was, okay, when you bet legitimately, you have to have the money to bet. Yeah. And if you don't have the money, you can't bet. Well, that's great, except for the fact that all these are tied to everybody's credit cards. So most of these guys are betting. They don't actually have the money. They're using their credit, and then they're mad and they're screwed. So I don't know. I do think the idea immediately is this is because of the online betting. This is why this is happening. But I do think we need to look at the other side of it, which could be that it's simply easier to figure the stuff out that it's happening than it was before. Although before online betting, could you have found a bookie in the world that would have taken a bet, given you odds on whether Luis Ortiz threw a strike on the first pitch of an at bat in the second?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the answer is, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's not anything where you could make a cottage industry out of it. So,
I mean, I watched that Sebastian Maniscalco show on HBO, Bookie, and he would take action on that. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff that we still don't know. It's pretty. At least with Ortiz, you mentioned that. Well, they've noticed the gambling traffic. They noticed a couple of pitches, but it's still just a couple of pitches. It seems like it's a similar case that they're building against Clase, and somebody has kind of mentioned, maybe half jokingly, well, that Ortiz, it wasn't even half jokingly, it's been in a couple stories that he sort of said, hey, you want a bigger fish?
Yeah,
I might know some things about a teammate of mine, so we'll see if that goes anywhere. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that we don't know yet. Is there what kind of pressure has been put on these players from the point of, were they threatened? Are they trying to make extra money on the side? Do they think, I'm not throwing the game. I'm just throwing a couple pitches outside. That's pretty harmless. I mean, all of that, those are all plausible outcomes. But I think it just goes to show that maybe this wasn't that well thought out of an idea. Now, it's not like baseball's fault that all these state governments made gambling legal, although you probably could argue that baseball didn't try as hard as it did for years and years to prevent it. They lobbied big time to keep this stuff illegal for years. And then maybe they let up a little bit. I don't know. So that it would become more legal, so that we would see the business partnerships that we see today. That's a reasonable take. But it's just all of the other fans being into it more and being able to reach the players on social media with terrible threats.
Yeah.
And the whole climate with the ads and the games, I absolutely hold the players accountable for potentially breaking the golden rule in baseball that you don't bet on the games. But at the same time, it's you don't have to be. It's not much of a leap to say, yeah, all this chummy stuff with the gambling companies made this more possible and made it more likely and made it more frequent that we're going to see these guys picked up for these offenses. And I was going to say before, it goes back to maybe they didn't think it all the way through, because now, people are going to go, yeah, well, what else has Clase been? What other bad pitches has he been throwing? Or what is he thrown down the middle? And maybe there's no evidence that he threw any games or had any other like little side bets that were harmful. But this is what everybody's going to think. This is what a lot of fans are going to question the integrity of the game, which is the whole reason we have a commissioner in the first place, because of the stuff that went on 100 years ago with the White Sox. And that's where this is going. So, you say like, well, we it's not like we can put the toothpaste back in the tube on gambling, but I have a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets better for baseball, because it's going to make even the least circumspect people in the world go, what's going on here? And that doesn't make for a good competitive environment. It doesn't really even make good for a good gambling environment. You sort of, as far as widespread gambling goes, you want it to be on the up and up. You don't want it to be fixed, because you never know when it's going to be fixed and against you, and that's going to prevent people from people like me from gambling. I mean, I wouldn't anyway anymore. It's quite a catch-22 is brewing here for baseball, for sure.
The sports betting is basically legal or all over the country, because Chris Christie, when he was governor of New Jersey, they sued because you could bet on sports in Vegas, but not in Atlantic City.
Mm-hmm.
And that case wound its way finally to the Supreme Court, where Brett Kavanaugh is the one who wrote the majority decision. He was so excited.
Yeah, right.
He had finally gotten his credit card bills paid off, and now it was time to do some serious gambling. So that's who we have to thank for that: Chris Christie and Brett Kavanaugh,
America's finest.
during last night's Cub game, Marquee handled, I guess, as well as you could. They started playing the somber music, kind of like how Fox has for football, they have like the injured player version of their theme, the very soft piano version they play when they go. Well, they started playing soft music, and Boog told us that Ryne Sandberg had passed away. And we had known it was coming without knowing it was coming. I mean, a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they put out an Instagram post from Ryne that basically sounded like a goodbye. He didn't say goodbye, but he was saying goodbye. And then Kerry Wood threw out the first pitch at a Cub game, and he was wearing a Ryne Sandberg batting practice jersey, and John Lester did it, and I'm sure the Cubs just gave the guys the same one. They weren't going to actually give them we need that back now, John. What? Bob Dernier did it last week. When Jed was on with Boog and JD from the booth during a game, he spent the first few minutes on the air talking about Ryne, and then Jane Forbes Clark gave a nice little tribute to Ryne at the beginning of the Hall of Fame induction ceremony on Sunday. And so we found out last night that he did die. He was only 65. And I wrote a thing about him today in the newsletter, which I made free, so people can read it if they want. But one of the things I talked about was, for people of a certain generation, you and I are in that generation.
Yeah.
The way I put it was, for Cub fans, Ryne was the first star we had that we didn't have to share.
Right.
Like, we didn't have to share him with our parents. He wasn't Ernie or Ron or Billy. And we didn't have to share him with other teams. Like, he played with great players. He played with Andre Dawson. He played with Greg Maddux. Well, Andre Dawson had started his career with the Expos. Greg went and spent the best years of his life with the Braves, probably because he was a Brave. But we had Ryne, who had played 13 games for the Phillies in 1981, but those didn't count because he only batted 6 times, and Dallas Green was busy yelling at him for, tuck your shirt in or whatever he was doing. And then Dallas left the Phillies and went to the Cubs and immediately traded for him. And it always cracked me up. And I saw it today. Bob Costas was talking about it. That Sandberg was the throw-in in the Larry Boa Ivan DeJesus trade. Who the fuck thinks that Dallas made that trade for Larry Boa? and he was fine to let that kind of like
of Sandberg as a throw-in, at the very least, is an overstatement or an understatement. I think we. I'm sure to change the culture of the clubhouse, whatever, Boa was important, whatever. But it's not like we're not going to give Dallas credit for fleecing his old team. I mean, he knew, kind of. Maybe he didn't know he was getting a Hall of Famer, but
no. But he knew he was getting, like, Ryne started right away at third base the next year. So he traded for a starting infielder. It was not a throw-in in the deal. Sandberg played third that first year, and then he moved over to second when they traded for Ron Say. And I don't know if this is true or not, but Harry always said it. Harry said that Sandberg was the first player to win a Gold Glove in his first year at a new position. I have no way of quantifying that, but Harry said it all the time, so I just assumed it was true.
Maybe that was a young Ed Hardig's. He dug that up.
Why would Harry lie to us? And so I wrote a lot about how Harry and Ryne were kind of a necessary pairing for Ryne, because Ryne, for as great a player as he was, there's no personality there. No. He was a blank slate, and Harry gave him his personality. Ryne didn't have to talk. Harry talked about him every day, and he was a great player, and Harry loved to go on and on about him, and playing all those games on WGN. Pretty much his entire career, they were on the Superstation. It didn't hurt to have his big breakout game on the Game of the Week on NBC in the Dave Owen game, co-starring Ryne Sandberg and Willie McGee. he was never my favorite player. I loved Sean Dunston. He lined up next to my favorite player. And then I liked Greg Maddux more, and I liked Andre Dawson more. But I certainly, even as a kid, I appreciated just how good he was. Like, I never was like, I can't believe we have Ryne Sandberg on our team. You loved having him on your team. Even to the point where the glove that I used for most of the time I played in Little League and through high school is a Ryne Sandberg glove that I lost. I cannot find it. I don't know what happened to it. And I found the exact same glove on eBay, and I bought it. And I have no reason to have it. I don't need a baseball glove, but I had to have it, and I have it. And I pulled it out last night to look at it. And, he was going through to write the column today. You knew all this stuff because we lived through it. But, Craig Counsell was talking after the game last night about how him and Ryan Flaherty said at least once a week, or at least when they're home, will sit on the bench and look at Wrigley Field and go, how the hell did Ryne Sandberg hit 13 triples here in 1984? How do you hit 13 triples in this park? He was one homer and one triple away in 1984 from being the third player in baseball history with 20 homers, 20 doubles, 20 triples, and 20 stolen bases.
Right.
And the other two are Willie Mays and former Cub great Frank Wildfire Schulte, who did it in 1911 when the homers were the amazing part. Like, holy shit, that guy hit 20 home runs in a season.
Wow. That is a lot for 1911.
Yeah. He won the MVP. And if people who listen to remember this crap, we love to talk about how Frank got his nickname, because it involves carnal knowledge of a famous actress who was in a play called Wildfire. That's how Frank got that nickname. He only played in the playoffs twice, and he was great in them both times. He slugged 800 against the Giants in 1989. They did not lose either of those because of Ryan. And the only terrible playoff moment we have wasn't his fault. A double play ground ball hit to him at Jack Murphy Stadium, hit a fucking rock and bounced like 8 feet over his head, not just over his head. Right. He was, he was a great player. He was a lot of kids' favorite player. I mean, I think during that era, if you were a Cub fan, the majority of people, they liked Ryne Sandberg. I remember, everybody has a personal thing with Ryan. I have two. When I was a kid, Mike Donahue was on the field with me. We didn't know each other at the time. We were little kids, but we both went to a Cub game where they had like on-field clinics before the game. Mm-hmm. And they just ushered all the kids out on the field, and they had kind of little areas roped off like a petting zoo. And Ryne Sandberg showed you how to like field a ground ball. And I have a picture that I can't find here somewhere that my dad took of me, like kind of like leaning in front of Ryan. Like, this is a picture of us. And then later I met him at a Cub convention, and he autographed a ball for me, and I said nice things to him, and then because I'm an asshole, I looked over and said, "Oh, is that your daughter? Wow, she's really pretty." He told me to move it along. Yep. I was simply admiring, Ryan. I'm sorry, I thought you take it as a compliment, the way it was meant.
Yeah, he was a contemporary of Cal Ripken. They came up almost exactly the same time, and I always thought, well, Ripken is the shortstop of the era, and Sandberg is the second baseman of the era, and these are the best players at their position in the 80s. So I always thought of him in a Cal Ripken sense. And I also, I think I appreciated him more when you'd get Joe Morgan on TV complaining about how, Sandberg was a guy that he had, I don't know if this was true or not, but the reputation was that he didn't dive. And it was, as we've later come to find with good scouting and analytics, the best plays aren't always ones where you dive or where it looks like you're making a great play. And I always sort of stuck up for Sandberg. I don't know if it was the Chicago fan in me or just I was sick of hearing from Joe Morgan about it.
Yep.
Strangely enough, just because Joe Morgan was a great player in every way, and there was no reason. Joe Morgan gave you any reason to dislike Joe Morgan. He was like all sorts of things that he hated about the game. Joe Morgan lived it, but whatever.
Yep.
But I always sort of took up for Sandberg because well, if it pissed off Joe Morgan, then it was okay.
I agree 100%. Joe Morgan, my biggest frustration with Joe Morgan on Sunday Night Baseball was Joe Morgan didn't value any of the things that made in a player that made Joe Morgan great.
Right.
He couldn't understand why hitters walked so much. He walked an incredible amount. It's one of the things that made him great. He was pissed off at Sandberg first when Sandberg broke his consecutive errorless game streak. And that's when he started talking about, well, he doesn't dive, doesn't take any chances. He only, Well, at the top of a column today, there's a 6-minute highlight thing that the Cubs put together for a few years ago about Ryne. He's diving all over that fucking thing. Yes. And I remember the exact same complaint. I had Sox fan friends who were like, oh, he doesn't even dive. It's like, well, it's because he's not Joey Cora. He actually gets to the ball and throws the guy out.
Out there, I don't think so.
He doesn't have to skid around the fucking grass to try to get to the ball. He can just get to the ball. And then Morgan was also mad that Sandberg came back after his brief retirement and then broke his record for most homers in second. That was the whole reason Joe was mad. He was a bitter jerk who had a microphone for 3 hours a week on ESPN to air his grievances, of which he had many. Yeah, and it's weird. The retirement in my mind was longer than it was. Like, he only sat out one season. And I tried to get to why he quit in 1994. There was a lot of stuff that went into it. We knew the number one reason was he got a divorce. There was weird stuff going on, and there's been all kinds of rumors about, involving teammates and stuff. But there was also a lot of other stuff. He was in 93, he got hit by a pitch in spring training by Mike Jackson and broke his wrist. He had a terrible year in 93. He only hit 9 home runs. And he was off to a bad start in 94. The Cubs were terrible in 94. He's got crap going on at home that he probably feels like he needs to deal with. But also there's a looming lockout that everybody knew was coming. Like, this was not a secret that this might very well happen. And I think at some point he's like, fuck it. I'm done with this. He made it to June. The Cubs are bad. He's not hitting well. He's like, I think I'm done. And then I wrote in greater detail than I meant to today about the end of the 95 season. The scrappy Jim Riggleman Cubs were on the verge of elimination and wouldn't lose. They won 8 in a row with 10 games. In the final 10 games, they won the first 8 in a row. And they just could not get eliminated from this new thing, the wild card. And the 8th win in a row was this wild walk-off win against the Astros, who they were battling with the Astros and the Rockies for the wild card, where they were down. Mike Hampton was shutting them out in the 9th, and they rallied and tied. He was shutting out 3-0, and they rallied and tied it. And then they won it in the 10th on a Luis Gonzalez base-loaded single. And the fans went nuts, and everybody was excited. And one of the people who was there was Ryne Sandberg. He went to a whole bunch of games on that homestand. And he basically said later that that's the moment he decided he wanted to come back. He's like, this was like fun. I missed this. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So he came back, and then he played on 2 terrible Cub teams, including the 97 team. He started 0-14. He was good in 1996, his first year back. He had 25 homers, drove in 92 runs. And both years, he was still a good second baseman. He wasn't, quotes, Ryne Sandberg anymore. But he was one of the best defensive second basemen in the game still. And so it's not like he didn't embarrass himself when he came back. But he got 2 more years in, and he got to retire more on his own. He got to break Joe's record, which pissed Joe off. He probably cemented his Hall of Fame case in those final 2 years. He probably needed that one other thing, which is ridiculous. Right. But, we don't know how the Hall of Fame works. And then he retired, and then he probably had the same feeling because all of a sudden there's the 98 Cubs, which he's like, I think I'll come back for 99. No, Ryne, no, you're done. You don't get to come back again. We let you do it once. But yeah, and they, he wanted to manage the Cubs, and Jim Hendry kept trying to navigate that. Like, I just don't think he'd be a very good manager. Well, he went to Peoria. He managed the Peoria Chiefs for 2 years, I think, at least one. Finally got his, got to manage the dream job of his life. He got to manage the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, and then eventually got to manage the Phillies. And then decided after he got fired from there, said, "All right, I don't want to do that anymore." And then he kind of settled into this kind of like fun, just like Cub legend in residence.
Mm-hmm.
He revered everywhere he went. He treated everybody really well. I'm probably the only guy he ever called an asshole. He didn't actually say that. He just thought it. And just kind of settled into, he got treated in the final years of his career the way every athlete would like to be treated. Like, no Cub fan saw Ryne Sandberg and didn't want to run up to him and tell him, give him a whole list of, these are all the cool things you did. Like, I know I was there, but thank you. I appreciate it. And the last thing he got to do with the team, really, I mean, he was in spring training this year. He was still healthy enough to do that. But he got a statue last year. And it's a really cool statue. They did a really nice job. And so that's there. And so it's sad. Nobody should die at 65 of a disease that should be curable, and we can't figure out a way to cure it. But all in all, that's a pretty great life, I think, that he got to have.
It's a nice, a nice way you put it there. That, I mean, except for the pain of illness and the sadness of the early end of his life, as far as baseball goes, he got all his flowers.
Yeah.
He deserved it.
Well, now the Cubs should honor him by doing the thing that they never could do when he was playing for them, by actually going out and finding some pitching. If you want to honor Ryne Sandberg, fix your pitching staff, because that's what he would want. And they have 2.5 days to do it. Well, not even. I got about 2 days to do it now. Get
Tuesday,
to work.
Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, about 2 days. In a couple
2 days and a few hours. All right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yes, we will.
All right.
In a couple weeks.
Many of us have herpes.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. I mean, got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Thank you. Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Andy.